There are a lot of ways to collect data. We'll consider some different types, their properties, strengths, and limitations. One way to get data from participants is to ask them. This can be done by an interview, but surveys are used more commonly since they're quicker, easier, and cheaper. These are considered self-report measures. Sometimes researchers ask others close to the individual of interest in order to check or corroborate the participant's response. Tanner stages, shown here for females, represent physical characteristics of puberty and are used in research looking at changes over this developmental period. It might not be appropriate for a researcher to ask children to indicate which body is most similar. It could lead to anxiety or discomfort. So sometimes parents are asked for this data. This is considered a report by other. This alcohol use survey was used to group participants into alcohol consumption categories, so this is an example of self-report data. There are many issues to consider when using self-reports. One big one is that it's limited to humans who can read, so excludes young children and animals. Language proficiency can also affect data, especially with questionnaire-based surveys, since many are available only in English. Another problem is the social desirability bias, the tendency to present oneself in a positive light, to be judged favorably by others. Asking about personally sensitive topics like honesty or aggressive acts are more susceptible to this bias, especially in a face-to-face setting, so questionnaires are sometimes preferred. Test yourself. List advantages and disadvantages of using self-report to collect data. This is one example of how to organize your thoughts to compare these two types of measures. List the advantages in one column and the disadvantages in another. The other way to get data from participants is to observe them, which is called a behavioral measure and often relies on measuring movement. Unlike self-report measures, behavioral measures can be taken from any aged human or non-human, regardless of their language ability. Behavioral measures include anything that can be viewed from simple observation, but the reuse of remote devices, like activity monitors, allows researchers to watch from afar. Here are two examples of behavioral data based on measurements of movements, an animal example on the left and a human example on the right. The graph on the left shows activity in mice across the light-dark cycle. This was measured using an implanted device that tracks movement. On the right is the famous graph from Darley and Latané's bystander helping study, where participants were tricked into thinking they were communicating with others over an intercom. When an imaginary research partner faked a seizure, Darley and Latané measured the time it took for the participants to leave the room and seek help. Although they used time as a variable, it's considered a behavioral measure because it assesses the speed of their helping behavior. Tests are sort of a mix of self-report and behavioral approaches. There are many types, but they usually involve some performance task like an IQ test or perceptual task as assessed by the Ishihara color blindness test shown on the right. Although they do involve an element of self-reporting, they are less subject to the social desirability bias, since it's difficult to fake performance or perceptual abilities. There's only so much information available by observing individuals. There's much more going on beneath the surface. Sometimes researchers are interested in responses of the autonomic nervous system, which changes with emotional states. Physiological data involves measuring changes in the body, usually involuntary responses. This typically involves using some sort of specialized device. This study looked at the effect of a drug on stress-induced increases in heart rate in rats. The y-axis on the left shows heart rate in beats per minute, obtained through telemetry from implanted transmitters. The x-axis on the bottom shows the time after stress exposure. Baseline is shown by the gray shaded region. The link between stress and illness has fueled a lot of research using animal models. We can't ask rats for self-reports of stress, but we can infer that they experience stress by their increase in heart rate. Note that the drug had little effect in this study. In order for scientists to analyze data, it needs to be coded. This usually falls into one of two categories: numerical or categorical. Numerical data is represented by a number, which means that you can perform mathematical calculations. For instance, if you collected height data from everyone in your class, you could calculate the average value. Categorical data is represented by grouping or classification, so it's not possible to do math on it. You could also collect eye color from everyone in your class, but you couldn't calculate an average eye color. The nature of how data is coded guides the type of analysis that can be performed, so understanding measurement is a critical first step in research studies. Test yourself. In the alcohol use survey described earlier in the study by Lahout and others, 2002, what type of data was collected from participants? Choose all that apply. A. Behavioral, B. Physiological, C. Categorical, D. Self-report, or E. Nominal. There are many types of data a researcher can choose when designing a study. The advantages and disadvantages must be considered for the type of information required. A safe approach is to measure more than one type of variable to offset disadvantages that come with each type.